Please rise for invocation followed by flag salute. Lord, in these difficult and uncertain times for many, we must remind ourselves that we have much to be thankful for here in Williamsport. To just scratch the surface, we must remember to be thankful for our neighbors who so enrich our lives. We must remember to be thankful for the many features of our community, including its arts and cultural opportunities, the great restaurants, our parks and recreational amenities, all of which help to enhance our quality of life. And finally, we must remember, Lord, to be thankful for our public safety professionals in terms of our police and fire and codes departments who work hard to keep us safe. For these reasons and many more, let us remember to give thanks. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome to the Williamsport City Council meeting of Tuesday, November 21st, 7:30, and happy Thanksgiving. Next item on our agenda then is approval of City Council meeting minutes dated November 9th, 2017. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Hearing motion and a second. Any comments or questions, members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and those minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no request for that this evening, which means we can move on to the next item, which is ordinance enacting a code of ordinances in final reading. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
An ordinance enacting a code of ordinance for the City of Williamsport, revising, amending, restating, codifying, and compiling certain existing general ordinances of the political subdivision dealing with subjects embraced in such code of ordinances.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance in second reading?
Second.
Hearing motion and a second. Mr. Lubin, how are you this evening?
Good evening, Dr. Williamson, members of council. This is the second reading on an ordinance. Not sure what Dave said last meeting, but I have nothing to add.
He would say that you would read it from the beginning to the end for us.
Oh, if you want me to read, I'll gladly read it to you.
No, the codified ordinances.
Okay, the book right there.
Any comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance is approved in final reading. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance of the City of Williamsport related to licensing and taxation code in final reading. Mrs. Frank, please.
Ordinance of the City of Williamsport, Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, amending Part 3, Article 333 of the City Code, mercantile license tax to increase annual license fee, correct typographical error, increase time in which an appeal may be filed, change appeal procedure to review by hearing officer, add cost of collection to amounts due from the delinquent taxpayers, remove requirement to file appeal in order to make a payment under protest, and to permit certain enforcement procedures to also proceed by civil means resulting in civil fine.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve that ordinance in final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion second. Mr. Grimes, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good evening, members of council. The only thing I have to add to these three ordinances is that you all received a copy of new rules and regulations in regards to business privilege tax collection that's been filed with the city clerk, and I have gotten the mayor's approval for that. So before those are enacted, if you have any further comments or questions, you're welcome to call me or email me, and we'd be happy to make any adjustments that you feel necessary to that document.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the ordinance in final reading.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that ordinance is approved in final reading. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance related to the business privilege tax. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
Ordinance of the City of Williamsport, Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, amending Part 3, Licensing and Taxation Code, Article 349, Business Privilege Tax of the City Code to impose an annual license fee of $10, to remove any inclusion provision that has been deemed unconstitutional, to increase time in which an appeal may be filed, to change appeal procedure, to review by hearing officer, to add cost of enforcements to amounts due from the delinquent taxpayers, to remove requirement to file appeal in order to make payment under protest, and to clarify certain enforcement procedures to impose fines.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve that ordinance in final reading?
So move.
Second. Hear a motion and a second. Anything further to add?
Except that I'm impressed that I think Mrs. Frank did that all in one breath.
I was exhausted by the time she got done. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance is approved in final reading. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance related to this mercantile license tax. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please, can you do it again?
Ordinance of the City of Williamsport, Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, repealing Part 3, Article 301 of the City Code, Board of Revision of Taxes and Appeals, and replacing same with the local tax hearing officer appeals process.
Oh, it was much shorter. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance in final reading?
So move. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Anything further?
Nothing further.
All right. Comments or questions? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that ordinance is also approved in final reading. Mr. Grimes, thank you again for getting all of these updated to and entering into the 21st century on these. We all appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is ordinance, also in final reading, of the 44th year community development budget. Mrs. Frank, in short form.
An ordinance, 44th year, 2018, community development budget.
Can I have a motion and a second for this ordinance in final reading?
So move. Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Mrs. Young, how are you?
Fine, thanks. This is our 2018 Community Development Block Grant and Home Budget for final reading, and I have nothing more to add.
Okay. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that ordinance is approved in final reading. To save you another trip up, let's jump down to a resolution to approve fiscal year 2018 annual action plan. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution to approve the fiscal year 2018 annual action plan for the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Programs.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution?
So move.
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. Ms. Young?
Yes, this is our 2018 Annual Action Plan for the city's Community Development Block Grant and Home programs. The plan will be submitted to HUD and includes a narrative descriptions of the projects that will be funded in 2018. And obviously, the budget for those projects was just approved on second reading. As required by HUD, the city has met its requirements for public participation. There was a public needs hearing held and also a public hearing on the actual draft copy of the action plan. And the plan was also on public display for citizen review for the required 30-day period from October 11 to November 9. The plan discusses housing issues and housing providers, but the primary focus of the plan is really on the projects that we'll be doing in 2018. And the action plan was reviewed by the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy? Or Mr. Allison, Finance?
Yes, we did, Finance did review this today. Of course, this is the form that gets sent into HUD. The actual dollars and cents and what they're going to be spent for, we've already discussed that, and we just passed on second reading that portion of it. But the rest of this is are the legal requirements from HUD to for this to be approved by them, so that we can spend the money that way, and then they check up on it. And we had a good discussion with Mrs. Young about the nuts and bolts of how all this works. Of course, we didn't go over every single little item here. It's quite a thick plan that has to be sent in. However, we did discuss, some of the items we discussed were the fact that there's a coordinated task group in the county, and that has up to, is it 80?
80, yeah.
80 different social service agencies that have a stake in this, and they meet
Every month.
every month.
Once a month, mhm.
They meet monthly, and it's not just a pro forma meeting, they actually brainstorm and plan and coordinate together. So I think it's that the citizens and the city government can have a lot of confidence that the money's not just being spent to spend it. There's a lot of thought, and it's the kind of cooperation and coordination that we look for in every partnership we're involved in. So people can be very confident that this community, this federal money is being spent well, but there's also planning going on for the future and how groups can work together to make those services more effective, to reach the people that need it, and to plan things for the future. We talked about a couple items in here, a couple dollar and cents items. This is basically the same form that gets filled out every year, and we've always been approved, so our community development office has been doing a good job. They've never been called on or found wanting in any area of this, so we commended Mrs. Young on that and the good job that they're doing, and the various different parts that they have to move around and keep basically juggling different responsibilities to make this all work. It's not just simply plug and play kind of thing. There a lot of thought and a lot of work goes into putting a document like this together. So we passed it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Next item on the agenda is a resolution to approve bill of sale, which has been on the table for a while. This evening, we received a list of items associated with the bill of sale, and I spoke with Mr. Winder, sorry, and we thought maybe the best thing to do would be to refer it back to committee for discussion. And so to make that happen, what I will entertain is first a motion to remove the item from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion in a second. Mrs. Frank on the motion to remove from the table?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and so that's on the table. And while we can have discussion if we'd like at this point, the other thing I would ask for is a motion to refer this back to the Public Works Committee so that this list can be reviewed.
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion in a second. Any comments or questions on this motion? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and so the resolution is referred back to the Public Works Committee. for review. And I anticipate, I have no reason to believe that this won't return to us ready to go on the 7th, which is our next meeting. Thank you, by the way, for putting the list together. I appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is a resolution to ratify the action of the Finance Committee approving the bond purchase. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution to ratify the action of the Finance Committee approving an addendum to the bond purchase agreement.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Mr. Nichols, how are you this evening?
Fine, thank you, and good evening, President Williamson, Vice President Allison, members of council. As stated in the resolution, this is to ratify an action taken by the Finance Committee, a special meeting held last Wednesday. Specifically, the Finance Committee approved an addendum to the bond purchase agreement, which was originally approved by City Council at its October 12th meeting. This addendum sets forth the final interest rates and other provisions for the general obligation bonds that were issued last Wednesday. And the Finance Committee met its obligation by reviewing the final interest rates to ensure that the bonds that were issued satisfied the minimum 2.5% savings criteria set forth in the bond ordinance. And if you notice in your packet of information on the last page, you will see a summary of the savings, which indicates that the total savings are $1,160,703. And we noted there on the side there that the savings on the 2013 bonds is 5.02%, and on the 2014 bonds is 4.21%, and both are well in excess of the 2.5% threshold, and the total savings exceeded what was first projected and presented to City Council. I think it was in August, and obviously this helped provide a no tax increase budget for next year. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Council for the support of the several actions that were needed to go through this process, and thank all those involved because it turned out better than we expected. And with that, I'll defer back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Because the Finance did the action, there was no review by Finance, so let me open it up for comments or questions. Mr. Henderson.
Just to note, I think there is a discrepancy on the actual wording in the first paragraph of the resolution. It says the aggregate principal amount $21,500,000. Then in parenthesis it says $23,325,000. I'm wondering if we need to make a change on that, or am I missing something?
The word should be 23 million. We pulled this from our one in 2014, so we probably should make the motion to.
So I'll entertain a motion to amend the words to $23,325,000. Is that correct? Yeah.
And I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nuviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is amended. Thanks for the catch
Thank you.
there.
Thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Mealy?
I just wanted to, for the sake of clarification, I guess, mention that when council had initially sort of authorized the Finance Committee to act on behalf of the city, we had said that we would be satisfied with a 2.5% savings, and so which would have been substantially less, about somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000, and so the Finance Committee felt very safe taking the 5% savings, but we were delighted that it came out that way, because apparently the market was trending in the other direction, and then all of a sudden reverse course just in time to save us $1 million. So that's great. Anyway, we appreciate your trust in our abilities, and we also appreciate that this was not a more difficult decision to make. So thanks, Mr. Nichols.
And we thank you for the 4-0 vote of the Finance Committee.
Oh, yeah, and it may be that one member of Finance thought the meeting was at another time, and one of us, the chair, forgot about it entirely and had to take her 3-week-old daughter to the proceedings. But she voted heftily in the affirmative with a resounding yowl. So anyway, yes, that's all.
Other comments or questions? I mean, there's two parts of, that deserve thanks here. One is any day that you can save the taxpayer money and hear over $1.1 million into the future, it's a good day. And then to not only do that, but also make an estimate and then exceed expectations is yet another reason for thanks. So Bill, thank you, and Joe, and the work that you did with M&T to make that happen. And I think I can speak for council. We're happy to play our part to save the taxpayers that kind of money.
So there's a little bit of luck there.
A little bit. You didn't plan that months ahead of time?
I wish I could say that.
Scheming to save $1 million? If there are no other comments or questions, Ms. Frank, on the resolution.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the purchase of a lift. Mrs. Frank.
Resolution authorizing the purchase of a SM30L rotary one-way lift.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution?
So move.
Second.
Your motion and a second. How are you this evening?
Pretty good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
This resolution is to purchase a SM30L rotary runway lift. We currently have a in-ground post lift that was put in 1980. The cylinder that lifts it is rotted. The lift has been out of service for a couple months. The current lift is not repairable. The safety aspect of it, it's not even worth repairing. The new lift would bring a lot more safety features, better use, more durability. The purchase price is $31,914.02. It is under state contract pricing. It would come out of Streets General Fund, the equipment line item 227064010. It did go to Public Works and Finance Committee with a positive recommendation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, Public Works.
Yes, we actually reviewed this today, and Adam gave us a very good description on what currently is there and what needs to be done to bring this up. And I think one of the main things that I thought about was after he discussed this with us, that it's a miracle somebody hasn't been killed. This piece of equipment that's in there is so dangerous. And when you lift a truck that weighs tons and tons, and you have somebody working underneath it, and the post is rotted, and I asked Adam, when the last time we were inspected by OSHA? And when RVT's been inspected by OSHA? And that's something that we really need to be concerned about, is the safety of our workers, whether it be the streets and parks, RVT people, or our firemen and policemen. So I applaud his efforts in bringing this to us when he did, before somebody did get killed with this collapse of this piece of equipment. And as he pointed out, this is being purchased through a state contract on CoStars. So we didn't have much to think about because the money is there to purchase it. And we voted in the affirmative to send it to full council for a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Allison, Finance.
Yeah, we also reviewed it and we talked about the money mostly, but also did get briefed on the state of the disrepair of the previous equipment, and but how this is a lot more heavier duty piece of equipment that will be able to service our different departments. So, there's a plan to move ahead. I'm not going to speak to the whole extent of it, but to save the city money in the future using this and some other things that can be done in the department. You know, we were excited to hear about that as well. The money is coming from, well, actually, the roller, the asphalt roller that we were going to purchase, or they were going to purchase, will be put off. So this is more of an immediate need. So I think it's all going to work out pretty well in the end. So we pass it to full body council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Noviello?
Just, as we've already been saying, it's just kind of a no-brainer. Adam, to give us a good rundown on the equipment. What I liked hearing about it was that it had more than a few safety features associated with it. So we've got some additional safety amenities that we haven't had available to us before with a similar type of device. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you say this one can lift more than we had previously been able to lift as well?
Correct.
Okay, so this gives us a number of things to our advantage that we didn't have in the past. And obviously, safety is the first and most paramount concern. So it was a nice catch by Adam. I'm happy to get this up and ready to run here. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy?
Just a quick question to be sure. For some reason, I had recollected that we weren't getting the asphalt roller until 2018 anyway, because I thought we'd moved some other money around in liquid fuels earlier this year. Am I wrong about that?
This is general fund money.
This is, oh, sorry, general fund. For some reason, I thought we had utilized the funding for the asphalt roller to purchase another piece of equipment. No, okay, all right, just wanted to clarify and make sure that we weren't double spending, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? One thing I'd like to thank you, and please pass this along to the rest of your department. Something we used to tease Bill Wright about was how he and all of you really kept equipment running and useful well beyond what it was probably designed life would be. And, you know, while it might be well past that now and maybe to the point where it's a little bit beyond where it should be in terms of danger, to say you have a piece of equipment that serviced the city for 37 years, they don't build them like that, and they don't maintain them, more importantly, like that anymore. And so we're glad that your department does and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Because again, if we can stretch a couple extra years out of each piece of equipment, in the long run, that saves taxpayers a lot of money. So thanks for that.
Definitely. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz?
I just wanted to add, what Adam's going to do too is that even though the company's going to come and install this into the cement, a lot of work is going to be done in-house.
Correct.
As far as putting this together, which is also saving us money. So we really have to appreciate what extent you've gone through to make sure that this is going to get accomplished and how much money you're going to save.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there no other comments or questions? Ms. Frank on the resolution, please.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved. Next item on the agenda is, except for filing, we have the Finance Committee meeting minutes of August 1st, 2017, Public Works minutes of August 1st, 2017, and the Veterans Memorial Park Commission minutes of July 2017. Can I have a motion and a second to accept these for filing?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion and a second. Comments or questions? Mrs. Katz?
I just have a question about the Veterans Memorial. You know, I'm really not familiar with this, but when you read the minutes, there are things that need to be done. Where does the money come from for this, to get what they need to be accomplished in? Okay.
Adam and/or Joe?
They're reaching out for donations, they sold bricks. I know they're generating more revenue doing, they reached out to Streets and Parks to do some minor excavation work.
Stuff of that nature, but we're not actually funding any of it, correct, Joe?
It's all through donations.
It's all through, because the report is really good. There's a lot of things that are in good shape, but there are things that they really need, and I just wanted to know where the money was going to come from to help them.
Yeah, they seek donations for the Veterans Memorial and the Submarine Memorial.
Okay,
There are two of them.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on except for file? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes. and those are accepted for filing. Next item on the agenda is announcements. There will be an executive session for the purpose of negotiation immediately following the regularly scheduled council meeting. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting will be held on Thursday, December 7th at 7:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Before that, we have other upcoming meetings. On Monday, November 27th at noon is the Planning Commission. At 7 p.m. is the first budget session. On Wednesday, November 29th at 7 p.m. is the second budget session. On Monday, December 4th at 1 p.m. is the Bike Path Committee. Tuesday, December 5th at noon is Public Safety Committee, and at 1 p.m. is Public Works. 3 p.m. is Finance Committee. On Thursday, December 7th at 10:30 a.m., I'm assuming, unless the fire department's going to have a late night meeting, since they're always on the job. At 10:30 a.m., the Fire Pension Review, and at 4 p.m., the Police Pension Board Review, and then, of course, that evening, the City Council meeting. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening at 8:01. Are there comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mayor, you or your administration?
Good evening, City Council. How is everyone tonight?
Fine.
Great. Enclosed is my administration's 2018 budget proposal, which keeps the real estate tax millage at 14.72, while maintaining all existing city services, focuses on improving public safety initiatives, and provides for resources to continue downtown revitalization efforts and other infrastructure improvements. The 2018 budget, as in the past, presents significant challenges because of mandated budget increases related to bargaining unit contracts and the ongoing levy certification process. My staff and I have worked very, very hard, and publicly I'd like to applaud them once again. As we crafted a budget to meet the city's needs, my administration was able to achieve significant savings by advance refunding the city's current debt and receiving a premium reduction for health care costs. The 2018 budget highlights and other significant initiatives are the following. Several bullet points. Incorporates a 2% reduction of health care premiums. Budgets an investment of $1,250,000 for the levy recertification project. Includes an expected $220,000 savings in debt services payments related to a recent advance refunding of the city's current debt. Upholds the current recreation program and provides for the operation of a memorial pool, 2 park programs, numerous special event activities, and presents a net cost of less than 1% of the proposed general government budget. Establishes an economic development marketing position to proactively promote, recruit, and retain city businesses. Continues to allocate funds for the Graffius Run project. Maintains funding for a Park Avenue planning study. Anticipates funding from Act 13 in the amount of $350,000 and $400,000 from Benecon Health Insurance surplus. Restores general government funding for the purchase of a loader, roller, and hillside mower for the Public Works Department. Provides savings in the Public Works Department by adjusting administrative staff responsibility, as known as multitasking. Allocates additional funding for maintenance needs at Splash Cove. Offers additional funds for planning through the city's planning department and consultant fees. Includes a full-time procurement coordinator to centralize the city's purchasing program. Reinstates funds for community outreach events as the Public Safety Fair and Police Department Open House. Increases the training budget for the Bureau of Police. Reallocates funds for the replacement of tasers. Provides additional funds to the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office to plan and prepare for the collection of business privilege, mercantile, in LST taxes. The city administration looks forward to working with City Council to adopt the 2018 budget and hopes everybody has a safe and nice Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from your administration? Hearing none. Any comments from the general public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Hear a motion in a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving.